The grandfather clock struck midnight when screams shattered the silence at Hawthorne Manor. Nia dropped her cleaning supplies and sprinted down the marble hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something was terribly wrong. She'd been working late, polishing the crystal chandelier in the dining room, when those awful sounds cut through the night like broken glass. "Ilara," she called out, her voice echoing off the towering walls. The screaming stopped. Dead silence. Nia's blood turned to ice. She knew that silence meant something far worse than noise. She burst through the mahogany doors of Ilara's bedroom and found her worst nightmare sprawled across the Persian rug. 12-year-old Ilara Hawthorne, the brilliant, misunderstood girl who'd become like a daughter to her, was convulsing violently on the floor. Her small body twisted and jerked, foam spilling from her lips, eyes rolled back, showing only white. "No, no, no," Nia whispered, dropping to her knees. Her hands shook as she tried to remember first aid training from years ago. "Ilara, baby, stay with me." The child's skin felt like ice. Her breathing came in sharp, desperate gasps that sounded like she was drowning from the inside. Nia had seen seizures before. Her younger brother used to have them. But this was different. This was violent. Terrifying. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive. A 12-year-old girl is having severe convulsions. Please hurry." The next 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Nia held Ilara's head, whispering prayers and promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The paramedics arrived in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. They loaded Ilara onto a stretcher, her fragile body still twitching, and raced toward County General Hospital. Nia sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance, clutching Ilara's cold hand, watching machines beep and flash around them. The paramedic kept checking vitals, his face grim. "Is she going to be okay?" Nia asked. He didn't answer. That silence told her everything. At the hospital, doctors swarmed around Ilara like bees protecting their hive. Nia paced the waiting room for 3 agonizing hours, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Ilara hit her head? Was it epilepsy? Some rare genetic condition the wealthy Hawthorne family had kept secret? When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the treatment room, his expression was darker than the night outside. "We've stabilized her," he said, but his tone carried no relief. "However, we found something disturbing in her blood work." Nia's stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" Dr. Martinez looked directly into her eyes. Ilara wasn't having a seizure disorder. She was poisoned. Someone deliberately gave this child a toxic substance that nearly killed her tonight. The words hit Nia like a physical blow. Poisoned. Someone had tried to murder a 12-year-old girl. But who could do this to an innocent child? If you're hooked by this shocking twist already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. 6 months earlier, Nia Washington had knocked on the imposing front door of Hawthorne Manor with nothing but a worn suitcase and desperate hope. She'd lost her apartment after her ex-boyfriend cleaned out their joint bank account and vanished. At 28, she was starting over with $53, a nursing degree she couldn't afford to use, and nowhere else to turn. The housekeeping position at the estate paid well enough to rebuild her life, if she could handle working for the notoriously difficult Hawthorne family. Previous staff lasted an average of 6 weeks, Mrs. Hawthorne had warned during the interview, her cold blue eyes appraising Nia like expensive furniture. "My daughter can be challenging." That was the understatement of the century. 11-year-old Ilara Hawthorne was brilliant, stubborn, and completely misunderstood by everyone around her. While other kids played video games, she composed classical music on her piano. While they watched cartoons, she read philosophy books and asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. The other staff called her weird or difficult. Her own parents seemed afraid of her intelligence, like it was some kind of disease they couldn't cure. But Nia saw something different. The first time she heard Alara playing piano, a haunting melody that seemed to capture every lonely feeling Nia had ever experienced, she knew this child was special, not strange. The music was so beautiful it brought tears to her eyes. "That was incredible," Nia had said after the song ended. Alara spun around on the piano bench, shocked. You liked it? Liked it? I felt it. That's real talent." For the first time since Nia had arrived, the girl smiled. Over the following months, they developed an unspoken bond. Alara would play her compositions while Nia cleaned nearby, both of them finding comfort in the shared silence between songs. They discussed books, dreams, and the loneliness that seemed to echo through the massive house despite all its luxury. Alara wasn't difficult. She was just a brilliant child trapped in a family that didn't know how to love her properly, which made the poisoning even more heartbreaking. Someone in this house wanted to destroy the most beautiful soul Nia had ever known. Sterling Hawthorne was worth $3 billion, but he couldn't buy a conversation with his own daughter. Nia watched him from across the breakfast room the morning after bringing Alara home from the hospital. He sat at the head of the mahogany table, perfectly pressed in his charcoal suit, reading financial reports while his recovering daughter picked at her scrambled eggs in silence. Not once did he look up from his papers. To the outside world, Sterling was everything powerful men should be, commanding boardrooms, closing deals worth more than most people saw in a lifetime, gracing magazine covers as Businessman of the Year. His steel gray eyes could make grown executives sweat with a single glance. But with Alara, those same eyes seemed lost. "How was your piano practice yesterday?" he asked without lifting his head from the documents. "I didn't practice yesterday, Father. I was unconscious in the hospital." Alara's voice was flat, emotionless. Sterling's jaw tightened. He finally looked up, and for just a moment, Nia saw something crack in his composed facade. Pain, maybe, or guilt. "Of course. I meant, how are you feeling now?" "Fine." The conversation died there. Suffocated by years of distance, neither knew how to bridge. Nia had seen this pattern dozens of times. Sterling would attempt connection through questions about school, music, or books. Alara would give minimal answers. He'd retreat behind work, and she'd disappear into her room. Two people living in the same mansion, but existing in completely different worlds. The irony was heartbreaking. Sterling had everything money could buy: private jets, vacation homes, art collections. But he was failing at the one thing that mattered most: being a father. After breakfast, Nia found him in his study, staring out the window at the sprawling gardens he had designed but never walked through. "Mr. Hawthorne," she ventured carefully, "Alara's been asking if you might listen to her new composition sometime." His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "I wouldn't know what to say about it." Music was always Vivian's thing. Vivian, Alara's mother, who died in a car accident 4 years ago. Since then, Sterling had thrown himself into work like a man trying to drown in success. The emotional walls he'd built were higher than the mansion itself. "You don't need to know anything about music," Nia said gently. "You just need to listen." He turned from the window, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his face before he masked it again. "Perhaps," he said, but they both knew he wouldn't. Later that evening, Nia passed his study and heard something that made her pause. Through the cracked door, she could see Sterling holding a framed photo of Vivian and young Alara at a piano recital, both of them smiling. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. The great Sterling Hawthorne, master of a universe, was just a broken father who'd forgotten how to love his daughter. But someone in this house didn't care about his grief or Alara's brilliance. Someone wanted that little girl dead. What would you do if you were Nia? Stay loyal to a cold employer or walk away? Comment your thoughts below. If Sterling was ice, his second wife Clarice was fire, beautiful, bright, and potentially destructive. At 29, she was closer to Alara's age than Sterling's, and she never let anyone forget how stunning she looked. Platinum blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, designer clothes that cost more than most cars, and a smile that could charm donations from billionaires at charity galas. But that smile never reached her eyes when Alara was around. Darling, you simply must do something about that child's table manners, Clarice purred to Sterling over breakfast 2 days after the hospital incident. She dabbed her glossy lips with a silk napkin. Yesterday, at the Henderson brunch, she corrected Senator Walsh's Latin pronunciation in front of everyone. It was mortifying. Alara kept eating her oatmeal, pretending not to listen, but Nia saw her small hands grip the spoon tighter. Alara's extremely intelligent, Sterling replied without emotion. She was probably right about the Latin. Clarice's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm, pretty but sharp. Intelligence is wonderful, of course, but social graces matter too. People are starting to talk. That was Clarice's greatest fear, people talking. She'd married Sterling for his wealth and status, transforming from a small-town beauty queen into a society wife whose picture appeared in Vogue and Town and Country. Every dinner party, every charity event, every public appearance was carefully orchestrated to maintain her perfect image. Alara's awkward genius threatened that facade. Perhaps some supplements might help with her energy levels, Clarice suggested, pulling out an elegant silver pillbox. Dr. Reynolds recommended these for stress and focus. Very natural, very safe. She shook 2 small white capsules into her palm, smiling that brilliant empty smile. What kind of supplements? Nia asked, unable to stop herself. Clarice's eyes flicked toward her with barely concealed irritation. Nothing that concerns the help, I'm sure. But Alara was already reaching for the pills, trusting the woman who'd promised to take care of her after her real mother died. The changes started subtle, then spiraled into chaos. First, Alara began pushing food around her plate instead of eating. Then came the violent stomach cramps that left her doubled over in the hallway outside her room. Finally, the projectile vomiting that painted her bathroom walls with everything she tried to keep down. It's probably just a bug, Clarice insisted when Sterling expressed concern. Children get sick all the time. But Nia knew better. She'd watched Clarice hover around Alara's meals, always ready with those helpful supplements, always smiling that perfect smile while handing over the little white pills that Alara dutifully swallowed. Mrs. Hawthorne, maybe we should skip the supplements until she feels better, Nia suggested one afternoon. Clarice's eyes went cold. Are you questioning my judgment about my stepdaughter's health? I'm just concerned. Your concern is cleaning and cooking, not medical advice. The sweet facade cracked just enough to reveal something ugly underneath. Stay in your lane, Nia. But how could she stay quiet when Alara was withering away? The brilliant 12-year-old who used to fill the house with music now barely had strength to sit upright. Her skin turned gray, her eyes hollow. Sterling noticed, but seemed paralyzed by his own emotional walls. Clarice insisted everything was fine while scheduling more social events that required a well-behaved stepdaughter. The explosion came on a Tuesday evening. Nia was folding laundry when she heard Alara screaming from the music room, not the normal sounds of childhood upset, but something primal and terrifying. She found the girl convulsing on the Persian rug, foam spilling from her lips, her small body twisted in agony. Things are about to spiral out of control. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the shocking hospital reveal. The emergency room at County General exploded into controlled chaos the moment the ambulance doors burst open. 12-year-old female, severe convulsions, possible poisoning, the paramedic shouted as they wheeled Alara through the automatic doors. Her small body lay still now, too still, connected to machines that beeped urgent warnings into the fluorescent-lit night. Nia ran alongside the stretcher, her hand clutching Alara's cold fingers. "Stay with me, baby. Please stay with me." The trauma team swarmed around them, doctors barking orders, nurses drawing blood, technicians hooking up monitors that painted jagged lines across green screens. Through the organized mayhem, Nia caught fragments of medical jargon that made her stomach clench. Blood pressure dropping. Pupils dilated and non-responsive. "Get me toxicology stat." They wheeled Alara behind double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only," leaving Nia alone in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. She collapsed into a plastic chair, her uniform still stained with Alara's vomit, and did the only thing she could do. She prayed. 27 minutes later, Sterling Hawthorne stormed through the hospital entrance like a man possessed. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, his face a mask of barely controlled fury and terror. "Where is she?" he demanded at the reception desk. "Where's my daughter?" The nurse behind bulletproof glass looked up calmly. "Sir, you'll need to. I'm Sterling Hawthorne. My daughter Alara was brought here with poisoning. I want to see her now." His voice carried the authority of a man who'd never been told no in his adult life. But hospitals have their own hierarchy, and money couldn't buy immediate access to trauma rooms. "Mr. Hawthorne, please have a seat. The doctor will update you as soon as possible." For a moment, Sterling looked like he might argue, might try to bull his way through those doors using sheer force of will. Then he spotted Nia in the corner, and something in his composure cracked. "What happened?" he asked, dropping into the chair beside her. Up close, she could see his hands shaking. "She was playing piano after dinner. Then I heard screaming." Nia's voice broke. "By the time I reached her room, she was already convulsing. The doctors mentioned poisoning on the phone." Sterling's eyes were haunted. How is that possible? Who would poison a 12-year-old? Before Nia could answer, Dr. Martinez emerged from behind the double doors, his scrubs wrinkled and sweat-stained. His expression was grim. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Dr. Martinez. We've stabilized your daughter, but I need to discuss our findings." Sterling shot to his feet. "Is she going to live?" "We pumped her stomach and started her on activated charcoal. The convulsions have stopped, but—" The doctor paused, choosing his words carefully. "The toxicology results confirm our suspicions. Someone gave Alara a significant dose of digitalis, a cardiac medication that's extremely dangerous for children." Digitalis. Sterling's face went white. But where would she get? "This wasn't accidental exposure, Mr. Hawthorne. The concentration in her bloodstream indicates deliberate poisoning. Someone has been giving her this substance regularly over several weeks." The words hung in the antiseptic air like a death sentence. Regular poisoning. Weeks of slow torture disguised as supplements or medication. Sterling staggered backward as if physically struck. "You're saying someone in my house has been trying to murder my daughter?" Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. "I'm required to report this to police and Child Protective Services. This is attempted homicide." As the two men discussed legal procedures and medical protocols, Nia slipped away to the observation window. Through the glass, she could see Alara hooked to machines in the intensive care unit, her pale face peaceful in medicated sleep. "I'm so sorry, baby," Nia whispered against the glass. "I should have protected you better." But who could she have protected Alara from? Someone with access to the house, to her food, to her daily routine. Someone who'd smiled while slowly killing a brilliant child. Someone they all trusted. Hawthorne Manor felt like a crime scene wrapped in expensive wallpaper. Police cars lined the circular driveway, their red and blue lights painting the mansion's white columns in ominous colors. Officers dusted doorknobs for fingerprints, photographed medicine cabinets, and sealed off Alara's room with yellow tape. The house staff clustered in the kitchen like frightened birds, their usual duties forgotten as detectives asked pointed questions about schedules, access, and suspicious behavior. "I always thought something was off about the new nanny," whispered Rosa, the head cook, glancing nervously at the officers. "She's been acting strange for weeks." "What nanny?" asked Thomas, the groundskeeper. "You know, Nia." Rosa's voice dropped lower. "She's the only one who spends that much time with Miss Alara. And she's always asking questions about family business." The whispers spread through the mansion like poison gas. By morning, half the staff was eyeing Nia with open suspicion. She wasn't family. She wasn't wealthy. She was an outsider who'd gained unusual access to their employers' lives. Perfect scapegoat material. Mrs. Chun, the elderly housekeeper, pulled Nia aside in the laundry room. "Be careful, child. People are talking, and none of it's good." "Talking about what?" "About how convenient it was that you found Miss Alara. About how you've been pushing for changes to her routine. About how you came here with nothing, and suddenly you're closer to that family than staff who've worked here for years." Nia's blood ran cold. She'd been so focused on protecting Alara that she hadn't considered how her devotion might look to others. A desperate woman with financial troubles gets close to a wealthy child who then mysteriously falls ill? The math was ugly, but it added up. Even Detective Rodriguez, the lead investigator, seemed to linger on his questions when he interviewed her. "You mentioned Miss Hawthorne had been refusing food lately. Did you prepare any of her meals?" "Sometimes when Rosa was busy." "And you had access to her room at all hours?" "I cleaned the entire house." "Of course I had access." Each innocent answer felt like another nail in her coffin. Every truth sounded like a lie when viewed through the lens of suspicion. The worst part was watching Sterling's eyes whenever he looked at her now. The man who'd barely noticed her existence was suddenly studying her every move, searching for signs of deception. Trust, once broken, infected everything. Who do you suspect at this point? The jealous stepmother, a staff member, or someone else? Let me know in the comments. Sterling's voice cut through the mansion's silence like a blade. "Everyone in the main hall. Now." Within minutes, the entire household staff stood in a nervous line across the marble floor, Rosa clutching her apron, Thomas shifting his weight from foot to foot, Mrs. Chun maintaining her dignified composure despite the circumstances, and Nia trying to keep her hands from shaking. Sterling paced in front of them like a general addressing troops before battle. His usual composed businessman facade had cracked completely, revealing something raw and dangerous underneath. "Someone in this room tried to murder my daughter." His steel-gray eyes moved from face to face, searching for guilt. "Someone I trusted. Someone I paid. Someone who looked me in the eye every day while slowly killing a 12-year-old child." The silence was deafening. "The police will investigate, but I want answers now, before lawyers and legal procedures muddy the water." He stopped directly in front of Rosa. "You prepare her meals." Rosa's face went ashen. "Mr. Hawthorne, I would never." "How long have you worked here?" 15 years, sir. I loved Miss Vivian like my own sister. I would die before harming Miss Alara." Sterling studied her for a long moment, then moved on to Thomas. "You have access to garden chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers." "Sir, I keep everything locked in the shed. Besides, I barely see Miss Alara except when she walks in the gardens." One by one, Sterling interrogated each staff member with a ruthless efficiency, that had built his business empire. But when he reached Nia, something shifted in his demeanor. The questions became sharper, more personal. "You're new here." "6 months." "Yes, sir." "You came with no references. No background in household service." Nia lifted her chin. "I was honest about that from the beginning." "Were you?" Sterling stepped closer, his presence intimidating. "You needed money. You needed a place to live. You gained access to my daughter's routine, her food, her medication." "I gained her trust," Nia interrupted, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "Something no one else in this house managed to do." Sterling's eyes flashed dangerously. "Are you suggesting I don't care about my daughter?" "I'm suggesting you don't know her." The words spilled out before Nia could stop them. "You don't know she composes music to deal with loneliness. You don't know she reads philosophy books because she's trying to understand why her mother died. You don't know she cries herself to sleep most nights because she thinks you blame her for not being the son you wanted." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Sterling's face cycled through emotions, shock, anger, and something that might have been shame. "How dare you?" "I dare, because I love that little girl." Nia stepped forward, matching his intensity. "I would give my life for Alara. I would die before letting anyone hurt her. And whoever did this," her voice broke slightly, "they're still out there while you're wasting time trying to make me the villain." For a moment, father and devoted caretaker stood locked in a battle of wills, both driven by love for the same child, both desperate for someone to blame. Then Sterling turned away, his shoulders sagging under the weight of accusation and grief. "Get back to work," he said quietly. "All of you." As the staff dispersed, Nia caught his arm. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need to focus on who really did this. While we're fighting each other, they're planning their next move." Sterling looked down at her hand on his expensive suit jacket, then back at her face. For the first time since the crisis began, she saw uncertainty in his eyes instead of accusation. "The question is," he said slowly, "who else could we have missed?" The lab results landed on Detective Rodriguez's desk like a bomb with a lit fuse. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, scanning the toxicology report for the 3rd time. The numbers didn't lie, but they painted a picture so calculated and cold it made his 20-year veteran stomach turn. He called Sterling immediately. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station?" "Just tell me over the phone." "Sir, this isn't phone conversation material. Trust me." An hour later, Sterling sat across from Rodriguez in a sterile interrogation room that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. The detective slid the toxicology report across the metal table. "The digitalis in your daughter's system came from those supplements your wife was giving her." Sterling's face went ashen. "That's impossible. Clarice said they were vitamins." "Mr. Hawthorne, each capsule contained enough cardiac medication to hospitalize an adult. Your daughter was being given what amounts to a slow-acting poison, disguised as health supplements, for approximately 6 weeks." The words hit Sterling like physical blows. He stared at the report, his hands trembling slightly as the implication sank in. His second wife, the woman he trusted with his daughter's care, had been systematically poisoning Alara. 6 weeks, he whispered. All those times Alara was sick, all those stomach problems. Your wife was essentially giving her controlled doses of a heart medication that's lethal in those quantities for children. The fact that your daughter survived this long is frankly miraculous. Sterling's shock transformed into something darker and more dangerous. His jaw clenched, his eyes turning to ice. "Where is Clarice now?" "At your house, as far as we know." "But Mr. Hawthorne." Sterling was already standing, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going home." "Sir, We need to handle this through proper channels. Don't do anything that could compromise the case." But Sterling was already walking toward the door, every line of his body radiating barely controlled fury. The drive back to Hawthorne Manor felt like the longest 20 minutes of his life. His mind raced through memories he'd ignored or dismissed: Clarice's constant complaints about Alara's behavior, her insistence on the supplements, her irritation whenever his daughter disrupted social events. Had she really been planning murder while he was closing business deals? He found Clarice in the sunroom, perfectly dressed as always, arranging white roses in a crystal vase like nothing had happened. She looked up when he entered, her beautiful face lighting up with that practiced smile. "Sterling, how's Alara doing? I've been so worried." For a moment, he just stared at her. This woman he'd married, this woman he'd shared a bed with, this woman he'd trusted with his child's life. "The supplements you gave Alara," he said quietly. "What about them?" She continued arranging flowers, not meeting his eyes. "They contained digitalis." Her hands stilled on the rose stems, just for a second. Then she resumed her task, but Sterling caught the slight tremor in her fingers. "I don't know what that means," she said lightly. "It means heart medication, Clarice. It means poison." The crystal vase slipped from her hands and shattered on the marble floor, sending water and rose petals across the sunroom. Clarice stared down at the mess, her perfect composure finally cracking. "I don't understand," she whispered. Sterling stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My daughter nearly died because of those supplements. The police have toxicology reports proving each capsule contained enough medication to kill her." Clarice backed against the window, her blue eyes wide with something that might have been fear or might have been guilt. "Sterling, I swear I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" "That you were poisoning a 12-year-old child." "I thought they were vitamins." The words exploded out of her. "Someone told me they would help with her energy levels, her focus problems." "Someone? Who's someone?" But before she could answer, they heard sirens approaching the mansion. Detective Rodriguez hadn't trusted Sterling to handle this alone. As red and blue lights painted the sunroom walls, Sterling looked at his second wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "Clarice," he said slowly, his voice heavy with betrayal and rage, "what have you done?" If this twist stunned you, subscribe right now, because the next revelation will leave you speechless. The handcuffs clicked around Clarice's wrists with a sound like breaking bones. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you're under arrest for attempted murder and child endangerment," Detective Rodriguez announced, as two officers flanked the sobbing woman. Clarice's perfect makeup ran in black streaks down her cheeks. Her designer dress was wrinkled from where she'd collapsed to the floor when they read her rights. The composed socialite who'd graced magazine covers was gone, replaced by someone desperate and broken. "Please, you have to believe me," she sobbed, looking between Sterling and the detective. "I thought they were vitamins. Someone told me they would help Alara with her behavioral problems." "Who told you?" Rodriguez pressed. "We need a name." I can't remember exactly. It was at a charity function maybe 3 months ago. A woman said she'd dealt with similar issues with her stepdaughter." Sterling watched his wife with cold eyes. "You expect us to believe you've been poisoning my daughter based on advice from a stranger at a party?" "It wasn't like that." Clarice's voice cracked. She seemed so knowledgeable, so professional. She said the supplements were all natural, completely safe. She even gave me the contact information for the pharmacy. "What pharmacy?" Rodriguez asked, pen ready. Clarice's face crumpled. "I don't remember the name. It was somewhere downtown, I think. Or maybe online. Everything's so confused right now." As they led her toward the door, she turned back to Sterling with desperate eyes. "I loved Alara. I would never hurt her intentionally. You have to believe me." But Sterling had already turned away. After the police cars disappeared down the driveway, the mansion felt eerily quiet. Sterling stood in his study, staring at the family portrait on his desk, him, Clarice, and Alara at last year's Christmas party. His second wife's smile looked different now, tainted by knowledge he couldn't unsee. Had she really been manipulated by some mysterious woman at a charity event? Or was this elaborate story just another performance, designed to win sympathy and reduce her sentence? The truth was, he didn't know his wife well enough to tell the difference. That night, Sterling sat alone in Alara's hospital room, watching machines monitor his daughter's fragile heartbeat. In the silence, memories surfaced like ghosts demanding attention. Last month, Alara asking if he wanted to hear her new piano composition. Him checking his phone instead, muttering, "Maybe later, sweetheart," without looking up. 3 weeks ago, her excited chatter about a philosophy book she discovered. Him cutting her off mid-sentence to take a business call. Just last week, her quiet question about whether he missed mommy too. Him changing the subject because grief made him uncomfortable. How many moments had he missed while building walls between them? How many times had Alara reached for connection only to find her father buried in work, hiding behind the excuse of providing for her future while ignoring her present needs? And while he'd been emotionally absent, someone had been slowly killing her. The irony was devastating. He'd hired staff to care for his daughter's physical needs, married Clarice partly to provide maternal influence, built an empire to secure her financial future, but he'd never simply sat with her and listened. It had taken nearly losing Alara to realize how completely he'd failed as a father. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered to her sleeping form. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." For the first time in months, he reached out and gently took her small hand in his. Her skin was warm now, no longer the frightening cold from the night she'd collapsed. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Nia stood in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee and looking uncertain. "I brought this in case you wanted." She began, then stopped. "I can leave you alone." Sterling looked at this woman he'd suspected, this woman who'd risked everything to defend his daughter. "No. Come in." She handed him the coffee and took the chair on the opposite side of Alara's bed. "She looks peaceful," Nia said softly. "She shouldn't have to look peaceful in a hospital bed." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, two people who'd found common ground in loving the same child. "Nia," Sterling said finally, "I owe you an apology." 3 days after Clarice's arrest, Nia was dusting Sterling's study when she noticed something that made her freeze. The leather-bound appointment book lay open on his mahogany desk, and a name caught her eye: Maurice Denning, Estate Planning Review, 2 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for the same day Alara had first gotten violently sick from the supplements. Coincidence? Maybe. But Nia had learned to trust her instincts where Alara's safety was concerned. She glanced toward the hallway, listening for footsteps. Sterling was at the hospital with Alara, and the skeleton staff was busy with their own duties. This might be her only chance to find answers that could protect the girl she'd grown to love like family. The desk drawers were locked, but years of cleaning houses had taught Nia that wealthy people often hid keys in obvious places. She found Sterling's spare set taped under the desk center drawer, a security measure that would fool casual thieves, but not someone who cleaned every inch of his office. The first drawer contained routine correspondence and business cards. The second held financial documents that made Nia's head spin: investment portfolios, tax statements, property deeds worth millions. But it was the third drawer that made her blood run cold: bank transfer receipts. Dozens of them, all dated within the past 4 months. Large sums moving between accounts she'd never heard of. And at the bottom of the pile, A handwritten note in Sterling's precise script. Maurice, handle the Alara situation discreetly. Whatever it takes. Nia's hands shook as she photographed the documents with her phone. Whatever it takes. What kind of situation required that level of secrecy and money? She dug deeper and found correspondence between Sterling and his lawyer that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Discussions about contingency planning and asset protection. References to Alara's behavioral challenges affecting social standing and business relationships. But the most chilling discovery was a legal document titled Guardianship Transfer Authorization, papers that would allow Sterling to place Alara in a specialized facility for troubled children if her condition was deemed beyond family management. The document was dated 2 weeks before Alara's first symptoms appeared. Nia sat back in Sterling's leather chair, her mind racing. Had Sterling been planning to send Alara away all along? Had the poisoning been designed not to kill her, but to create a medical justification for institutionalization? But that theory didn't make sense either. She'd seen Sterling's genuine terror at the hospital, his raw emotion when he thought he might lose her. Whatever his faults as a father, his love for Alara was real. So, who was pulling the strings? A sound in the hallway made her quickly photograph the remaining documents and lock everything back in place. She was wiping down the desk when Mrs. Chun appeared in the doorway. "Nia?" Mr. Hawthorne called. "He's bringing Miss Alara home tomorrow. The doctors say she's recovered enough to continue treatment here." "That's wonderful news," Nia replied, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. But as Mrs. Chin walked away, Nia stared at the phone number written at the bottom of one of the bank receipts. A number she recognized from seeing it countless times on Sterling's caller ID over the past few months. Maurice Denning's private line. The lawyer who'd been advising Sterling throughout this entire nightmare had access to Sterling's finances, his legal decisions, and his deepest concerns about Alara's future. A man trusted with family secrets who could easily manipulate situations to his advantage. A man who might see a brilliant but difficult 12-year-old as nothing more than an obstacle to a much larger prize. Nia's hands clenched into fists. If Maurice Denning had orchestrated this nightmare, she was going to make sure he paid for every tear Alara had shed, every moment of pain she'd endured. But first, she needed proof that would stand up in court. Maurice Denning had been Sterling Hawthorne's lawyer for 15 years, but he'd been planning his betrayal for the last 2. The distinguished 60-year-old attorney sat in his corner office overlooking the city, reviewing documents that would make him a very wealthy man, assuming everything went according to plan. The Hawthorne estate was worth nearly $4 billion, and Maurice had positioned himself to control a significant portion of it through carefully crafted legal maneuvers. The only obstacle had been Alara. 3 months earlier, in this same office, Clarice had sat across from his desk looking nervous and out of place. "I don't understand why you wanted to meet with me privately," she'd said, fidgeting with her designer purse. "Shouldn't Sterling be here for any legal discussions?" Maurice had smiled his practiced grandfatherly smile, the one that had convinced dozens of clients to trust him with their most sensitive affairs. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm concerned about your family's future. Specifically, Alara's increasing behavioral problems. She's just spirited. Intelligent children can be challenging. She's becoming a liability." Maurice had opened a thick file folder. "I've been documenting incidents, her disruptions at social events, her inappropriate comments to business associates, her general inability to conform to the expectations of her social class." Clarice had leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What kind of documentation?" "Witness statements, photos from events where she caused scenes, medical opinions suggesting she may have underlying psychological issues that could affect the family's reputation. The lie had been smooth, practiced. Maurice had been building this false narrative for months, carefully crafting a case that would justify extreme measures. "I don't understand what this has to do with me," Clarice had said. "Sterling loves his daughter, but love makes people blind to harsh realities. Alara needs help, professional help in a controlled environment. But Sterling will never agree to it unless he's convinced there's no other option." Maurice had slid a small bottle across the desk. "These are specialized supplements designed to help children with behavioral issues. All natural, completely safe. They'll help regulate her energy levels and mood swings." Clarice had picked up the bottle, reading the professional-looking label. "You want me to give these to Alara? I want you to help your stepdaughter before her problems destroy your family's reputation and Sterling's business relationships. These supplements will help her, and documenting their effects will provide the medical evidence needed to get her proper treatment." It had been a masterful manipulation. Clarice wanted to please Sterling and protect their social standing. Maurice offered her a solution that seemed to address both needs while positioning herself as the caring stepmother. What she didn't know was that Maurice had been systematically replacing the harmless vitamins with carefully measured doses of digitalis, just enough to create symptoms that would support his narrative about Alara's declining mental health. Now, 3 months later, the plan had gone too far. Alara's near-death experience had triggered a police investigation that threatened to expose everything. Clarice sat in a jail cell, potentially facing murder charges, and Sterling was asking uncomfortable questions about estate planning and legal procedures. Maurice needed to cut his losses and disappear before the investigation traced back to him. But first, he had one final card to play. He picked up his secure phone and dialed the number he'd memorized months ago. When Nia Washington answered, her voice was cautious. "Hello. Miss Washington, this is Maurice Denning, Sterling's attorney. I understand you've been asking questions about the family's financial arrangements." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I think it's time we met to discuss what you've discovered," Maurice continued smoothly, "and what it might be worth to certain parties to keep that information confidential." "Are you threatening me?" Nia's voice was steady, but Maurice could hear the fear underneath. "I'm offering you an opportunity. $500,000 in exchange for your silence about any documents you may have found. Enough money to disappear and start a new life somewhere far from the Hawthorne family's troubles." Another pause. Then, "And if I refuse?" Morris's smile was cold and predatory. "Then you'll find yourself facing charges as Clarice's accomplice. After all, who had more access to Alara than her devoted caregiver? Who better to administer the supplements without suspicion?" The threat hung in the air like poison gas. "Think carefully, Miss Washington. Your choices are simple. Take the money and walk away, or spend the next 20 years in prison for attempted murder. I'll give you 24 hours to decide." He hung up before she could respond, then immediately began shredding documents and transferring funds to offshore accounts. By tomorrow night, Maurice Denning would be on a plane to a country with no extradition treaty, $500 million richer, and free from consequences. Unless Nia Washington proved to be more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The county jail's visiting room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Nia sat across from Clarice, separated by reinforced glass and connected by a phone that crackled with static. Sterling's second wife looked nothing like the polished socialite who'd once graced magazine covers. Her platinum hair hung limp and unwashed, her orange jumpsuit a harsh contrast to the designer clothes she'd worn just days earlier. "I didn't expect anyone to visit," Clarice said, her voice hollow. "We need to talk." Nia gripped the phone tighter. About Maurice Denning. Clarice's face went pale. How do you know that name? He called me last night. Offered me $500,000 to keep quiet about documents I found in Sterling's study. Nia leaned forward. Documents that suggest this whole nightmare was planned months in advance. Tears began streaming down Clarice's face. Oh God, I'm so stupid. Tell me what happened. The real story this time. Clarice wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger and more vulnerable than Nia had ever seen her. He said the supplements would help Alara, that they were completely safe, just vitamins to regulate her energy and mood. You believe him? He's Sterling's lawyer. He's been with the family for 15 years. Why would I question him? Clarice's voice cracked. He showed me official-looking documents about Alara's behavioral problems affecting Sterling's business. He said if we could just help her calm down, be more manageable, everyone would be happier. Nia felt a chill run down her spine. What else did he tell you? That Sterling was too emotionally involved to see how much Alara was hurting the family's reputation. That as her stepmother, it was my responsibility to get her the help she needed. Fresh tears flowed. He made me feel like I was saving her, not slowly poisoning her. Clarice sobbed into her hands. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was protecting my family. But you suspected something was wrong when she got sicker. I asked Maurice about it. He said sometimes children resist treatment, that their bodies need time to adjust to the supplements. He told me to increase the dosage if the symptoms persisted. The evil genius of the plan became crystal clear to Nia. Maurice had manipulated Clarice's insecurities about being a stepmother, her desire to prove herself worthy of the Hawthorne name. He'd positioned himself as the wise advisor helping a struggling family, when in reality he was orchestrating attempted murder. Clarice, why would Maurice want to hurt Alara? What does he gain from this? I don't know. Clarice looked up, mascara streaked across her cheeks. But 3 weeks ago, he mentioned something about updating Sterling's will. Said that with Alara's behavioral problems, we needed to consider alternative arrangements for her care and inheritance. Nia's blood ran cold. Alternative arrangements, specialized facilities, long-term care options. He said if Alara's condition worsened, Sterling might need to make difficult decisions about her future. The final piece clicked into place. Maurice hadn't been trying to kill Alara. He'd been trying to create justification for having her declared mentally incompetent and institutionalized. With Alara out of the picture, Sterling's will could be restructured, and Maurice could position himself to control the family's vast fortune. Clarice, I need you to tell the police everything you just told me. Every conversation, every document Maurice showed you, every detail you can remember. He'll destroy me in court. He's one of the most powerful lawyers in the city. He's already destroying you. Nia's voice was fierce. Right now, you're facing murder charges while he's planning his escape. Your only chance is to tell the truth and help us stop him before he disappears forever. Clarice nodded slowly. Something like determination replacing the despair in her eyes. What do I need to do? But as Nia left the jail, one question nagged at her. Clarice's story explained the poisoning, but it felt incomplete. Was she still hiding something? Or was Nia's paranoia making her see deception where there was only a broken woman's regret? Either way, Maurice Denning was running out of time to execute his escape plan. And Nia was going to make sure he didn't make it to the airport. Sterling's fist connected with Maurice Denning's office door hard enough to rattle the frosted glass. Maurice, open this door right now. He'd driven straight from the hospital after Nia called him about the financial documents she discovered. 15 years of trust, 15 years of friendship, 15 years of believing this man had his family's best interests at heart, all shattered by photocopied bank statements and a recorded phone conversation. The hallway remained silent. Sterling tried the handle. Locked. He pulled out his phone and dialed Morris's private number, the same number he'd called countless times over the years for legal advice and personal guidance. It went straight to voicemail. "Maurice, I know what you did. I know about the supplements, the bank transfers, the plans to have Alara institutionalized. You have 1 hour to call me back before I involve the police." But even as he left the message, Sterling suspected it was already too late. The building's security guard, an elderly man named Frank, who'd worked there for 20 years, approached with a concerned expression. "Mr. Hawthorne? If you're looking for Mr. Denning, he left around midnight last night with several boxes. Seemed to be in quite a hurry." Sterling's blood ran cold. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, sir, but he asked me to forward his mail to a P.O. box downtown. Said he was taking an extended vacation to deal with family matters." Extended vacation. Right. Sterling drove to Morris's penthouse apartment, but the doorman confirmed what he already suspected. Maurice had cleared out overnight, leaving no forwarding address. His housekeeper had been paid 3 months' salary and told not to expect his return. The final confirmation came when Sterling called his bank. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but I can't provide specific details over the phone. You'll need to come in and speak with our fraud department." "Fraud department?" "There have been some irregularities with your trust accounts. Significant transfers that may not have been properly authorized." Sterling's hands shook as he hung up. 20 minutes later, he sat across from a grim-faced bank manager who delivered news that felt like a physical blow. Nearly $5 million has been transferred from various Hawthorne family accounts over the past 6 months. The transfers were authorized using your legal power of attorney, which Mr. Denning has held since 2018. $5 million. Sterling felt sick. Where did it go? Offshore accounts, mostly. Some domestic investments that appear to be shell companies. We're working with federal authorities to trace the funds, but the manager's expression was apologetic. Most of it appears to be gone. Sterling stared at the bank statements spread across the mahogany conference table. Maurice hadn't just been planning to institutionalize Alara. He'd been systematically looting the family fortune for months. The poisoning had been a distraction, a way to keep Sterling focused on his daughter's health, while his trusted lawyer emptied his accounts. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere your money can't reach me. Considered payment for 15 years of cleaning up your family's messes. M." Sterling crushed the phone in his fist, rage coursing through him like poison. Maurice Denning had stolen his money, nearly killed his daughter, and destroyed his second marriage, all while pretending to be a trusted friend and advisor. But the worst part was knowing that Maurice was probably right about one thing. He was already beyond reach, vanished into the maze of international banking and false identities that money could buy. Would you have seen this betrayal coming? Share your thoughts below. Dr. Martinez looked like he hadn't slept in days when he called Sterling into his office. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need to discuss the latest toxicology results. There's been a development that changes everything we thought we knew about your daughter's case." Sterling felt his stomach drop. Alara had been home for 3 days, slowly recovering her strength and appetite. The doctors had assured him the digitalis was clearing from her system and she'd make a full recovery. "Is she getting worse?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "No, her physical condition continues to improve. But the lab has completed a more comprehensive analysis of her blood samples from the night she was admitted." Dr. Martinez pulled out a thick folder. What we found doesn't match our original diagnosis. What do you mean? We initially identified digitalis as the primary toxin, the heart medication found in those supplements. But deeper testing revealed a second substance in her bloodstream, something that wasn't in the capsules your wife was giving her. Sterling felt the world tilt sideways. A second poison? Arsenic. Specifically organic arsenic compounds that would cause the gastrointestinal symptoms Alara experienced weeks before the digitalis poisoning reached critical levels. The doctor spread out lab reports and charts that looked like evidence from a nightmare. Someone was giving your daughter arsenic poisoning long before the supplement started. The digitalis almost killed her, but the arsenic was making her sick for months. Sterling's mind raced through implications. But Clarice only started the supplements 3 months ago. Are you saying someone else was poisoning Alara before that? That's exactly what I'm saying. The arsenic levels suggest regular exposure over at least 6 months, possibly longer. Small doses, carefully administered to avoid fatal toxicity, but sufficient to cause chronic illness. Who else had access to her food, her drinks? Dr. Martinez leaned back in his chair. Mr. Hawthorne, arsenic can be administered through food, drinks, even absorbed through skin contact with contaminated objects. Anyone with regular access to your daughter's environment could have been dosing her. Sterling thought about the staff, the visitors, the countless people who move through Hawthorne Manor on a daily basis. But one realization hit him like a sledgehammer. The person with the most access to Alara's daily routine, her meals, her personal care items. Nia. The timing is particularly concerning, Dr. Martinez continued. The arsenic exposure began approximately 6 months ago, right around the time your current household staff was hired. Sterling's blood turned to ice. 6 months ago was when Nia Washington had knocked on their door looking for work. 6 months ago was when she'd gained access to every aspect of Alara's life. Are you suggesting my daughter's caregiver was slowly poisoning her for months? Then someone else tried to finish the job with digitalis? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply presenting the medical evidence. Dr. Martinez's tone was carefully neutral. But you need to consider that your daughter may have been the victim of multiple poisoners working independently. Or, Sterling thought with growing horror, multiple poisoners working together. Had Nia been Morris's accomplice all along? Had she been softening Alara up with arsenic, while Maurice planned the final digitalis attack? The woman he'd grown to trust, the woman his daughter loved like family. Had she been slowly killing Alara while pretending to care for her? The pieces fit too perfectly to ignore. Nia's desperate financial situation when she arrived, her unusually close bond with Alara, her convenient presence whenever Alara had health crises, her suspicious behavior around the supplement routine, and now scientific evidence that someone with intimate access to his daughter's daily life had been poisoning her for months. Sterling felt sick as he remembered defending Nia against the staff's suspicions, praising her devotion to Alara, even apologizing to her for doubting her loyalty. Doctor, I need you to call Detective Rodriguez immediately, and I need complete copies of all these test results. Of course. But Mr. Hawthorne, Dr. Martinez hesitated. This is just medical evidence. It doesn't necessarily mean. It means my daughter has been living with a would-be killer for 6 months, Sterling interrupted. And I just brought her home yesterday. As he left the hospital, Sterling's phone was already ringing. Detective Rodriguez had seen the lab reports. Mr. Hawthorne, we need to discuss Miss Washington's whereabouts. Where is she right now? Sterling closed his eyes, knowing that his daughter's heart was about to break all over again. She's at home with Alara. The police cars arrived at Hawthorne Manor like an invading army. Nia looked up from where she was helping Alara with a jigsaw puzzle in the sunroom, her stomach dropping as she watched Detective Rodriguez and 3 other officers walk up the front steps. "What's happening?" Alara asked, her young face creasing with worry. "I'm sure it's nothing, sweetheart. Why don't you go to your room for a little while?" But before Alara could move, Sterling burst through the front door with an expression that chilled Nia to the bone. Gone was the grudging respect she'd seen in his eyes at the hospital. This was the cold, calculating businessman who could destroy lives with a signature. "Alara, go upstairs." "Now." "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Go upstairs." Alara flinched at her father's tone, tears springing to her eyes as she hurried from the room. Nia started to follow, but Detective Rodriguez blocked her path. "Miss Washington, we need to talk." Sterling moved to stand beside the detective, his arms crossed and his face granite hard. "The doctors found arsenic in Alara's blood. Arsenic poisoning that started 6 months ago." The words hit Nia like a physical blow. "That's impossible." "6 months, Nia? The exact time you started working here." Sterling's voice was deadly quiet. "The exact time someone with daily access to my daughter's food and personal care began slowly poisoning her." "You think Nia couldn't finish the sentence. The accusation was too monstrous. "Sterling, you know me. You know how much I love Alara. Do I?" His eyes were ice cold. "Or do I know a desperate woman who needed money and found a way to get close to a wealthy family?" Detective Rodriguez stepped forward with handcuffs. "Miss Washington, you're under arrest for attempted murder and child endangerment. This is insane." Nia backed away, her heart hammering. "Why would I poison her? What could I possibly gain?" "Maybe you and Maurice planned this together," Sterling said. "Maybe you were softening her up while he handled the legal arrangements. Maybe. I've never spoken to Maurice Denning in my life except for yesterday when he tried to bribe me." Nia's voice cracked with desperation. "I called you immediately to tell you about those documents." A perfect cover story. "Sterling, please." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "I would die for that little girl. I would give anything to protect her." For just a moment, something flickered across Sterling's face. Doubt, maybe, or remember trust. But then Detective Rodriguez spoke. "Mr. Hawthorne, we found trace amounts of arsenic in Miss Washington's bedroom during our search warrant execution this morning." The words fell into the silence, like stones into still water. Nia felt the world collapse around her. "That's impossible. I've never even seen arsenic." But she could see in Sterling's eyes that he'd already made up his mind. The evidence was too damning, too perfectly aligned to ignore. The woman he trusted with his daughter's life was being revealed as her would-be killer. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Nia looked up at the grand staircase where Alara stood watching, tears streaming down her pale face. "I didn't do this," Nia whispered. "Someone is framing me." But as they led her away, she realized the truth might not matter. Someone had been very careful to make sure all the evidence pointed directly at her. The question was, who had been planning this frame-up for 6 months, and why? 2 days after Nia's arrest, Alara finally broke her silence. Sterling sat beside her hospital bed, holding her small hand while she drifted in and out of medicated sleep. The doctors had brought her back for observation after she'd collapsed again at home, not from poison this time, but from the emotional trauma of watching Nia dragged away in handcuffs. "Daddy." Alara's voice was barely a whisper. Sterling leaned closer. "I'm here, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" Confused. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "Everyone keeps telling me Nia tried to hurt me, but that doesn't make sense." Sterling's jaw tightened. The evidence was overwhelming, but seeing his daughter's pain made him question everything again. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are, Alara. But Nia loves me. She's the only one who really listens when I play piano. Alara struggled to sit up. She wouldn't hurt me. Someone else did this. Sweetheart, the police found evidence. Someone else. Alara's voice cracked with desperation. Someone who comes to the house all the time. Someone I trusted. Sterling felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? Who comes to the house? Alara closed her eyes, her young face scrunched in concentration. The medications made it hard for her to think clearly, but fragments of memory were surfacing like pieces of a broken mirror. The tea, she whispered. The special tea that was supposed to help me sleep better. What tea? Who gave you tea? Every Sunday after piano lessons. Said it would help with my anxiety about performing. Alara's breathing became more labored. It tasted bitter, but they said that meant it was working. Sterling's blood ran cold. Sunday piano lessons. Only one person came to the house every Sunday for Alara's music instruction. Alara, who gave you the tea? I need you to tell me exactly. But before she could answer, Alara's monitor began beeping frantically. Her body went rigid, and foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. Nurse. Sterling screamed as his daughter began convulsing again. The medical team rushed in, pushing Sterling back as they worked to stabilize Alara. Through the chaos of machines and shouted medical instructions, one nurse's voice cut through the noise. Her symptoms are consistent with acute arsenic poisoning. Someone gave her another dose recently. Sterling felt the world tilt on its axis. Another dose. While Nia was in jail, which meant the real poisoner was still out there, still had access to his daughter, and had just tried to silence her permanently before she could reveal their identity. As the medical team fought to save Alara's life again, Sterling grabbed his phone and called Detective Rodriguez. The second poisoner just struck again, he said when the detective answered. While Nia Washington is in your jail, someone else just tried to kill my daughter to keep her quiet. Mr. Hawthorne, are you certain? Get down here now and bring a full protective detail, because whoever's doing this isn't finished, and they have access to this hospital. Through the window of Alara's room, Sterling watched his daughter fight for her life while connected to machines that beeped out her fragile heartbeat. Somewhere in the city, Nia Washington sat in a jail cell, wrongly accused of crimes she didn't commit. And somewhere much closer, maybe in this very hospital, a killer was preparing their next move. Sterling's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She talks too much. Next time, I won't miss. His hands shook as he showed the message to hospital security. The real poisoner wasn't just still free. They were close enough to watch Alara's room, close enough to strike again whenever they chose. And Sterling had no idea who he could trust to protect his daughter from someone who'd been planning this nightmare for months. The hospital went into lockdown within minutes. Security guards stationed themselves at every entrance, while Detective Rodriguez interviewed everyone who'd had contact with Alara since her readmission. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, even the chaplain who'd stopped by to check on the family. Everyone became a potential suspect. But the investigation yielded a chilling truth. The arsenic had been administered through Alara's foredrip sometime between 2 and 4 a.m., when the hospital was at its quietest and security cameras showed minimal foot traffic in the hallways. Whoever did this knew exactly how to access the 4 without triggering alarms, Detective Rodriguez explained to Sterling. They're either medical personnel or someone with extensive knowledge of hospital systems. Sterling paced the family waiting room like a caged animal. You're telling me the poisoner works here? Or has worked here in the past? The level of sophistication suggests professional medical training. A horrible thought struck Sterling. Dr. Martinez has been Alara's primary physician through all of this. He's had unlimited access to her treatment, her medications. "We've considered that," Rodriguez admitted. But Dr. Martinez was in surgery during the time window when the arsenic was administered. His alibi is airtight. Sterling's phone rang. The caller ID showed his home number. "Mr. Hawthorne? This is Mrs. Chun." The elderly housekeeper's voice was shaking. "I found something you need to see immediately." "What kind of something?" "Hidden behind the loose brick in the basement wall. A small glass vial with white powder residue. And there's a note." Sterling's blood turned to ice. "What does the note say?" "It says insurance policy, YH final dose." The handwriting looks familiar, but I can't place it. Sterling was already grabbing his keys. "Don't touch anything else. Don't let anyone in the house. I'm coming home right now." As he rushed toward the parking garage, Sterling's mind raced through possibilities. Someone with medical knowledge, someone with access to both the house and hospital, someone who'd been planning Alara's murder for months while carefully framing first Clarice, then Nia. But who in his inner circle had both the expertise and the motive? The basement of Hawthorne Manor felt like a tomb as Sterling descended the stone steps with Detective Rodriguez and a crime scene photographer. Mrs. Chun waited by the furnace, pointing toward a section of wall where one brick had been displaced. Rodriguez carefully extracted the vial with gloved hands, holding it up to the light. The glass container was small, pharmaceutical grade, with traces of white crystalline powder clinging to the sides. "Definitely consistent with arsenic compounds," he murmured. "And this note." Sterling leaned closer to read the handwriting on the small piece of paper. The script was precise, medical-looking, with the kind of careful penmanship that came from years of writing prescriptions and patient notes. His stomach dropped as recognition dawned. "I know this handwriting," he whispered. 3 weeks later, Hawthorne Manor felt like a house recovering from a long illness. Alara was home from the hospital, slowly regaining her strength and appetite. The arsenic was finally clearing from her system, and her doctors were cautiously optimistic about her full recovery. She spent most days at her piano, composing melodies that seemed to process the trauma she couldn't yet put into words. Clarice had been released from jail after her testimony helped convict Maurice Denning in absentia for financial fraud and conspiracy. She'd moved to her sister's house in California, filing for divorce and trying to rebuild a life shattered by manipulation and betrayal. Nia was back at work, though the false accusation had left scars that might never fully heal. Sterling had formally apologized and given her a substantial raise, but trust, once broken, was slow to mend. She still cared for Alara with the same devotion, but there was a wariness in her eyes now, a knowledge that even innocent people could become victims of elaborate schemes. Maurice Denning remained a ghost, vanished into the maze of international banking and false identities that his stolen millions could buy. Interpol had issued warrants, but Sterling doubted they'd ever see him again. Some predators were simply too clever to be caught. But the deepest wounds were invisible. Sterling had hired a security firm to monitor the estate and installed cameras in every room except Alara's bedroom. He'd changed all the locks, updated the alarm system, and run background checks on every staff member dating back 20 years. Because the most terrifying truth was still unresolved. The hidden vial in the basement had yielded fingerprints, but they belonged to someone who died in a car accident 2 years ago. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The hospital's investigation had found no evidence of staff involvement in the tampering. Someone had been extraordinarily careful to cover their tracks. Detective Rodriguez visited monthly to update them on the investigation, but his reports grew shorter each time. Leads went cold. Evidence trails ended in dead ends. Witnesses had nothing useful to share. "We're still actively pursuing all angles," he assured Sterling during his latest visit. But I have to be honest, without new evidence, this case is becoming very difficult to solve. Standing in Alara's doorway that evening, watching her practice piano with renewed passion, Sterling felt the weight of unfinished business pressing down on him like a physical force. His daughter was alive, but justice remained elusive. Clarice was free, but her life was destroyed. Nia was vindicated, but her reputation was forever scarred. Maurice was wealthy, but beyond reach. And somewhere in the shadows, a killer who'd planned the perfect crime had simply melted away, leaving behind only questions and the chilling knowledge that they'd come within hours of succeeding. As Alara's music filled the mansion with something beautiful and hopeful, Sterling closed his eyes and made a silent promise. He would never stop searching for answers. He would never stop protecting his daughter. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the security guards made their rounds, one thought haunted him more than all the others. The person who had tried to end her life walks free and closer than anyone dares to imagine.